Welcome back to the Live Your Dreams podcast. I am your host, Joe Gawalis, alongside my fantastic co-host,
Chris Victor.
I have to say, Chris, I'm very excited for this episode. I don't even know how to describe this person except the word wow. Yeah. You are an incredible individual, really. Alan Stewart Jr., everybody. This guy can do it all. A dynamic individual. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Really, we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited about this one.
No, thank you. And we were all introduced through Flory. He had treated us, and she was a guest on a prior episode.
Yep, I watched the episode
multiple times. She was great, and I have to say, she's always great at introducing and connecting some great people. So
100%.
Real thankful for us to introduce you. Now, Alan, you have done, for audience doesn't know you right now, really, you have done so much and accomplished so much, not only in the world of business, but as an individual. You are somebody that has affected so many lives. If you want to give us a little bit about what you do as an individual, but then let's go back to the beginning, because what we want to learn about is who is Alan and how did he get to where he is today? Because when everybody looks up the bios and the links below and they see what you're doing now, they're going to say, well, how can I be like this? And how do I get there as well?
I agree. That's why I'm excited to be on this podcast, because I've done several podcasts recently and they're all about business. And we're talking about how do you get successful, and, life. Your success definitely drives the quality of your life, but also fulfillment drives a huge quality of that. And I feel like in American society, we're so focused on, how do we get successful in the next level? And then we start to ignore our personal life. So this podcast, I'm truly excited about, because we can talk about things like that. But in terms of, worthiness of listening to, I own a few companies. I have a little over 100 people that work for me. And, it's in the real estate sector. I started a real estate company called Yellow Brick Real Estate out of a basement. It was just me and one partner, and we've grown it to the number 15 company in our brokerage in our state right now.
Right.
And we've come close to closing on like $500 million in sales. And then I have started throw-off companies off of that. I own an insurance brokerage for about 3 years now, which is definitely one of the fastest growing insurance brokerages in the country. Actually, last year we didn't receive an award, but my partner spoke on a panel because we were recognized as one of the fastest growing insurance companies. And then I have a development company where basically I buy distressed assets, I renovate them, and I resell them, or I resell them to myself and keep them and try to provide housing for people. And so those are the three verticals that I kind of run down right now professionally.
Did you still have those housing needs like they have here in New York, where they're housing people? There's a very large demand for that. Do you have that in Connecticut as well?
Yeah, and I think that's not going to really ever go away around here, because if you think about it, the 13 colonies were the original places where we colonized when we founded America back in the 1700s and started forming it. And so we're highly densely populated in this area. And before we started our, Manifest Destiny West, where over there's so much more land,
sure.
Right? So we're seeing a lot of housing spikes and valleys in those types of areas, because people are moving into those areas. But here, we're already densely populated, so people are just trying to find housing. They're not making more land.
Yeah.
So we need to make more housing, and sometimes that's dense, and sometimes that's just changing zoning laws so we can start to build on places that we wouldn't build on in the past.
Did I tell you wow, Chris?
Yeah, no, that's a wow.
How do you, this is the interesting thing, right? You have to spend years of your life to get to that position and say, wow, look at myself or look at this individual. Let's go back. Young Alan, before all these motivation, before you had this entrepreneurial spirit, what motivated you as a young boy that got you into this? Was this always your dream to be a business owner? What kind of set you on this path to start your journey into what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if I've always wanted to be a business owner, because honestly, when I was a kid, it was less about, what am I going to do when I'm growing up? And it was more about like, hey, how do I get through the next day or the next week? Or like, how do I manage the frustrations of whatever feelings I'm having in the moment? So like, I wasn't thinking that long term. And as we mentioned Flory earlier, like as a children, we don't know what emotional intelligence is.
Sure.
So really what I was trying to figure out is like, why am I feeling the way that I am? And, I when I was younger, I did think a lot with my mind, but I was forced to, because I was trying to refuse the feelings that I was having as an individual rather. So what I mean by that is I was just really trying to just comprehend, like I felt like, oh, when I get older, something great is going to happen. Greatness is within. But all this, but first I got to get through everything that's going on, and I can go a little bit more into that. I don't know how deep.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, you've mentioned a few things going on. I'd love to hear kind of more about your childhood.
Yeah.
Was it a happy childhood? Was it kind of conflicted? I'd love to hear kind of where you came from, because you're a man of resilience, and that sometimes that's built through conflict or love. And I'm interested to hear which it was for you, or maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, I think for just like many Americans, it's built from both.
Yeah.
When I was born in Bridgeport, and then I started living in a town called Oxford in Connecticut, and this is like a back road town at the time. You know, it's being more developed now, but it's like off a secondary highway in Connecticut. So really, there's not a ton of opportunity. It's more of a blue collar type environment. And you know, my mother and father were married, and they were living together. My mother was an extremely hard worker. She's a teacher, just retired, 46 years.
Wow, that's great.
She shows that hard work. And my father was a hard worker too, but he really liked to drink. He loved the bottle, you know. And so what that looked like is they were having their own difficulties, and those were showing up in their relationship. And typically, it's like romance and finance, right? So they were having that, and then the financial difficulties ended up happening. So what ended up happening was we moved away from the secondary town, and I moved into Fairfield, Connecticut, which was more of an established affluent town on the coast of Connecticut. Okay. And we moved there by chance because it just so happened that they were having their marital difficulties, but also not an opportunity, but my grandmother passed away, and my grandfather had early onset of Alzheimer's. Oh. So someone needed to move in and take care of him, and in a house where my mother grew up in. So we moved away from my father into that town. And that, even though I was just in kindergarten, that drastic change at such a young age can have a huge impact.
Sure.
Yeah, the schooling system wasn't as good in Oxford as it was in Fairfield. So I had to stay back. Yeah. So, but like, so you come in, you're into a new town, and which was great because I met a bunch of new friends, but you had to stay back. And I'll never forget, my mother was great at giving me a lot of choices. Well, sometimes she gave me the choices, sometimes I had no choices, but to make choices.
Sure.
I'll go a little bit more into that, but I remember sitting with her and the principal as early as kindergarten, and the principal recommending, hey, Alan should really stay back. You know, he came in a little later in the school year, and we're learning ABCs, and, you know, he's up till S, but really he should be beyond that. We should be moving on to the next thing. And my mom, as a teacher, said, well, I'm going to leave it up to him. And she looked at me and said, what do you want to do? And right away, she always reminds me of this response, but I also can go back to that moment where I said, I'd like to stay back because I'd like to have some more friends. So, you know, just turning that circumstance that could be negative into, you know, that was just my outlook at the time. And it was good, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
But then from there, not to get too deep into exactly what things happened, but my father kept coming in and out of my life, right? And what that looked like as a child is I was loved, and we were like lower middle class. So it's not like I didn't eat or anything like that. But when you're growing up in an affluent town with a single income family, with a father who's in and out of your life, and when you come home and you don't know what to expect, you're coming to a home with the lack of security and lack of safety. Like, that's supposed to be people's sanctuary.
Sure. Yeah.
That's why I love growing the brokerage and helping people find home, because it's their personal oasis, or it could be.
Yeah.
It also can be a very unsafe place too. And it doesn't mean that you're coming home and you're expecting your father to beat you or anything like that. It's just the instability, and you don't know what you're coming home to. And what that does for like a child, I believe now in hindsight, looking back, is, you know, it forces a child to develop what I call survival instincts, right? And to be very, when you're growing up with such drastic diversities, you have to be malleable.
Yes.
Personality, right? So you never know what you're coming home to, so you never know the person you have to be. So you end up forming to be like this chameleon, right? And that's great, because that can make you a really resourceful person. Yes. You know, so what that does is that insecure, or that lack of structure, or that lack of, you know, coming home to that consistency, again, it makes you a resourceful person, because it makes you have to be highly adaptable.
Absolutely.
Because we were talking about change before this. Like the only thing that remains the same is change.
Yeah. Yep.
It's inevitable. So what that forced me to do was be drastically different at home at different times, but also be a completely different person at school.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, like slowly, like the school system would get involved. And when they would get involved, they would ask a lot of questions. And none of my parents ever said, hey, what happens at home stays at home, like verbally, but like it was kind of a known thing.
Implied, yeah.
And then also when you're young, when you're looking out and you move from, when you move from anywhere and you have that change, but then you're also in this new affluent town and you're seeing your friends have new bikes or their parents driving BMWs and maybe they're wearing new clothes and you're having hand-me-downs. Like, you know that you don't have the worst life in the world, but you know that things are a little bit different.
Yeah.
You feel even more different, which kind of, if you don't know how to communicate that to people and talk through it, it makes you feel ashamed. So it makes you kind of stuff those things down and feel like you need to hide it. And you take on that responsibility very much so as a young child. So then you go into school, and in order to hide those things, you have to, once again, be very resourceful, have survival instincts. And at a very young age, I learned how to articulate myself very well.
That's good.
And I did that because I had to communicate to the teachers that nothing was wrong. And I had to communicate to the teachers that, you know, there's no red flags over here, which made me very good at making friends and winning people over. But it also made me very good at, you know, without the proper guidance, being manipulative and talking to teachers and maybe not putting in the work to get the best grades, but getting by and getting good grades because they liked me a lot or whatever it was.
So do you feel, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I really like what you said because I got the answer right there. Because you didn't have this sense of security and shelter, and you had to move, now you're providing shelter of people now in the future. So it's basically like a pay it forward type of thing that you learned.
Yeah, it's very synergetic. And I never really, we learn these things in hindsight. And I do want to just say, like, it's once again, because what I don't like is you see these successful people and they're all saying, oh, I grew up and there was no food and there was no this. Like, sure, every once in a while I'd come home and, you know, the power wouldn't be on. And it wasn't because my mother necessarily couldn't afford it. It's just we were late.
Little things happen in life.
Yeah, or maybe she was paying for my father's medical bills, because I'll go into, you know, some of that, those type of things.
Sure.
Because it got progressively worse as it got older. I mean, we're talking like,
Yeah.
you know, terminal illnesses and things like that. So, and maybe the heat wasn't on, right? But it didn't mean that it wasn't on for months on end. It's just like maybe it was 3 days, 4 days, maybe a week, or maybe it was just literally like a 2-hour thing. And when you're younger and you're looking at that, but you're also, your mother is an inner city school teacher, so you're going to after school programs with her.
Sure. Yeah.
You're seeing other children that have it way worse than you, and you're seeing this like, because where Fairfield is and where Bridgeport is, like most suburbs compared to inner cities, like you can go 3 miles, 5 miles, and the lifestyles are drastically different.
Sure.
And at a young age, I was exposed to both of these things, and I made friends because of those survival and
Skill sets.
in both those areas. Still to this day, you know, I had some friends from the inner city that, and in the suburbs. Some of them are not alive for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
Some of them went down the wrong path for different reasons. Like, I watched, it was interesting to just watch these two different drastically opposing lifestyles and environments shape these people and watch them make their choices. And I kind of got exposed to both of these things to the point where, you know, my life could have gone, it did actually for a while go in a drastically different way. But because I also got exposed to, you know, maybe a suburban lifestyle as well, like, I also had exposure to make some better choices where I didn't feel like things were necessarily forced on me, where maybe like less affluent people did. But not to go on a rant, but I just also I don't want to paint a picture of like my mother and father like didn't provide.
No. I don't think you are at all. Yeah.
This third world country, because like it was just, it honestly, in my opinion, you know, people that grow up in middle class or lower middle class, they actually maybe even have it the hardest. And that's why it's one of the shrinking, well, that and many other reasons, one of the shrinking classes, because they get exposed to these things and they're trying to find their way, because it, you know, being wealthy, you're in a club. And, you know, but also in poverty, you're in a club too. And it's a we versus them mentality. When you're in that middle class, or lower middle class, it's hard to find that, you know, it's hard to find your place. And I know I'm not alone with that. I know a lot of people feel that way, whether it's race, religion, sex, and, you know, it's just, and that's why I really appreciate that we're talking about things like this rather than business, because we don't find these things within us, you're never going to be successful.
You're 100% right. One of the things I was going to say is your story was fantastic about it. is this very relatable because, like you said, there's a lot of extremes when you listen to people talking about their tale. Oh, I was massively abused, or I was given a silver spoon. I like the fact that you're giving a very realistic approach to what happened. And let's go back now to when you're a child, right? You develop these skill sets, these great skill sets that obviously helped you in life. But apparently, through a lot of this, you're putting on a mask a lot of the times as a young man. And that has to carry a very heavy burden. Children don't realize when you're playing a part all the time, it emotionally will take a toll on you because you really never found your true self. Like you said, it's so important for all of us to find our true selves. So although you were able to kind of maneuver teachers or make a lot of friends, did you find it difficult when you went home by yourself and you were alone in your bed at night, or once in a while when you were surrounded by a crowd of people? Did you hear those silent screams ever saying, take the mask off? Where is Alan in all this? Was it hard to find yourself as you were trying to develop these skills?
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that I can tell that you're receiving the information. Like, there's a real conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's exactly what it is. And I call the term terminally unique, right? Because when we're putting on these masks constantly and we don't have a sanctuary or even people to go to, as sounding boards or a safe place to express the way that we feel, then we start to negate, no matter how articulate you are, the ability to express yourself just in general, right?
Yeah.
And then you feel really alone. And there's been many times in a group of people where I felt extremely alone. And you just kind of start steamrolling in that direction. And I have a big family, a loving family, very open.
Sure.
They will be brutally honest with you, and they will be there to console you if you allow it to. But because of all the extenuating circumstances, it necessarily wasn't like that. And when you're suppressing a lot of these things down, then all you're doing is burying them, and then you're being a different person for different people, which again gives you these skill sets, but then all of a sudden you just feel super, super alone. And then when you're super alone, you tend to go towards an avenue of super selfishness, super self-centeredness, and you're kind of, it's like me versus the world rather than we versus the world. And then that's how you get lost in, growing into manipulation or whatever. You're just trying to, again, it goes back to survival instincts.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, you become bitter or something, which is also not good for you.
Yeah. Or you're just like you're looking to, like when we suppress emotions a lot too, and don't acknowledge them and don't talk to people, we're looking to bury them. And you can only do that alone at some point. And then we start looking for outside verification. And for some people, that's joining, gangs, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Some people, it's joining, sports teams. It could be healthy outlet. Some people, it's using drugs, and it's, we start reaching for all these things to fulfill that hole, right? And that hole, like we were talking about earlier, like it's changing, it's ever changing. And it's like this spiritual shaped hole that shifts.
Oh yeah, 100%
to whatever it is that week.
Yeah.
Right. And I see patterns in my life, at least, and a lot of other people's lives, but who am I to judge?
Sure.
I'm not the arbiter of other people's behaviors. I try to really just be my own. But I've definitely gotten lost. There was a time period where I was doing a lot of bad behaviors.
Sure.
A very long time period where I was, abusing substances for a very long time. There was times where I've gotten addicted to money, whatever it is. Yeah.
And you find, because you're wearing the mask, and people that are listening, this is very important. Young entrepreneurs listening, young artists, people that want to break in and want to have success, you have to take the mask off, like you're saying. If you can't find that inner happiness, that inner peace, you are going to spiral down a dark path. It's inevitable. You will implode. How long, and if this might be a hard question to ask, did you find yourself kind of, as you started becoming that older teenager, you started having more freedom, you started being around more people, you started driving, being on your own? Was that when you found yourself kind of shifting more into those dark kind of mindsets of it's all about me, it's me, and you're kind of, the more freedom you get, the more you're pushing everybody away? Or when did you kind of start taking this self-inventory and saying, I need to make a change?
So the freedom actually came extremely young for me. So even though we had a very large family, a lot of my brothers my closest brother, I think, is 13 years older than me.
Okay, sure.
So by the time, and he was from a marriage prior to, my mom always says it was his, mine, and ours, right?
Yeah.
And ours was me and my younger brother. And there was a couple of miscarriages between me and my younger brother, but that's not that relevant. But in terms of, early on in, let's say, late elementary school, I'll give you a quick synopsis or a circumstance. A lot of my father was a heavy drinker. And again, I'd have to come home. He'd play games like hide the one, like a gin bottle, things like that.
yeah.
Right. And, you come home to what screaming or whatever. And my mom had to pick up that burden financially. So she was an inner city school teacher. They don't get paid that much. So then she showed me values like hard work, because then after work, she would work after work.
Sure.
She would go from tutoring. And then during this time of year, Christmas and Thanksgiving, she'd work at Macy's.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Wrapping gifts and checking people out. So I saw that. But because she was doing that, and whether my father was in the house or not, or drinking, like that gives a child a lot of freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
To the point where, the nights that she couldn't be there, maybe I would make my own food, right? Or the morning she couldn't be there, I'd have to, help get my younger brother dressed or walk him down to school. And I remember when I was in 5th grade, there was this one day where it was just a normal day, and he was getting dressed, and I was about to walk him down to elementary school. I was in 5th grade, he was in 4th, and we're going out the door, and all I hear is this loud like thud, and I shimmied him off, and he walked down to school on his own, and I walked upstairs, and my father's laying on the side of the bed. He fell off the bed, and he's having an epileptic. He's having a seizure, right? And it was, we know later it was because of a brain aneurysm, right? But so right when that happened, and these are those spiritual moments that, I don't know what it is. Gene calls it a download. And
Sure.
it's like God comes to you, or the universe comes to you, and it's just like prop up his neck, breathe into him, and call 911. Like no one prepares you.
No. How do you prepare for that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that whether it's personal or business, no matter how old we are, we all have these downloads.
Sure.
But we push them away a lot of times, and that's a different conversation. But anyway, so I did that, and the ambulance came, and I remember them coming in. I was alone. I did talk to my mom. This was when we only had hard lines.
Sure.
And she was at school, and the ambulance took him away. And little did I know, I wouldn't see him for another 2 years, because he would go into he went into a coma, then a medically induced coma, then after that physical rehab, and then after that substance abuse rehab, right? So that freedom opened up even more now, because with that freedom, there was even more diversity between me and my friends, because I felt like no one could relate. And
Sure. Yeah.
so it's we almost start pushing away authority. And then I started pushing away obligation too. I started neglecting maybe my younger brother a little more at that time. We were extremely close. And then so now my what little bonds I had started really going away. I started hanging out with older kids way more.
Yeah.
Right. And the rules were supposed to be, come home when the street lights come on, please. Well, it was come home when the street lights come on, then please, then Nokia phones came out. Here's a cell phone, because I don't even know where you are anymore, right? And so with that freedom, you are forced to make your own decisions. And when you're that young, you really shouldn't be making your own decisions.
Yeah. No. That's very mature to say that, because you're right. Because everybody you're there, you think you know what you're doing. No one that age knows what they're doing.
And I think that's the secret. We're all pretty older now, or midlife, right?
Yeah.
The secret is knowing I still don't know what I'm doing.
Nobody never do.
No one
never do.
He's learning.
Yep.
And my mom is 74 years old, and she's kind of we have a great relationship.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like that too. She's like, hey, we don't know what we're doing.
Nobody knows.
I like that always learning type of thing as well, because you mentioned change before, and there's a saying also, if you're not changing, change is inevitable. It's always happening. If you're not changing, if you're not working on yourself, you're not standing still. You're going backwards.
Yeah.
If you work on yourself, you can go forward.
Yes.
So it's really about a daily inventory of yourself.
I use that word all the time, and I coach people on business all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them all the time, a business that doesn't take inventory it often fails.
Yes.
But before, so many people come to me and they see me as an entrepreneur, and they're like, how do I become successful? How do I make more money? How do I grow a company? How do I attract people? How do I hire people? How do I follow people? What are standard operating procedures? All, everything. Yeah. How do I read P&Ls? How do I do all these complicated things? And that's exactly what I kind of go into. And I say, well, first, you need to be able to take a self-inventory, like a spiritual inventory, an inventory about your fears, an inventory about your resentment, an inventory about how you're harming other people, and come to a realization of this is who I am. And compare it to the person that you want to be, like your moral compass.
Yeah.
Is my every day, the way I'm talking to myself, the behaviors that I do, does it align with my moral compass and who I want to be? And if not, That's the first thing we need to change.
Yes. Yeah.
If we're not
Yeah.
changing that, then yeah, you can grow these big businesses. You can grow this cult-like following. You can grow whatever it is that you want, but it will not be sustainable because you're not being true to yourself.
You're 100% right. That's such an important thing to say. Be true to yourself. Know your moral compass, where you stand. And so many people are afraid to do that. Now, life is filled with these kind of pinpoint moments that change our lives, right? It's like a lightning bolt kind of striking, or like you said, God coming down and downloading something to you. There's moments that kind of impact you, that change things. You're going through these journeys. There's a lot of life happening to you. Was there a defining moment, or was there a time to build up where you started to say to yourself, you know what, I need to start taking this moral inventory? Because that just doesn't happen, overnight when you're, a 19-year-old kid living like wild. And there is a moment when people go, something I'm doing is wrong. You start feeling something inside of you slowly, when you're doing these things you shouldn't be doing. Maybe I shouldn't be hanging with this crowd, or maybe I shouldn't be, at the nightclub till 5:30 in the morning. There's things I shouldn't be doing here. It's not correct. You can feel it in your gut. What kind of started waking you up and then started you down that path to kind of say, you know what, Alan, let me start taking that, personal inventory and start being responsible for myself?
Yeah. I think that to address a couple of things you were saying, I think that there are pivotal moments in life. But a lot of times those pivotal moments, they don't need to be drastic, like dad having an aneurysm, falling to the floor type thing. Because there are a lot of subtle moments that I really attach myself to. I call them anchors. They bring you back in time.
Sure.
And I'm like, wow, that was a green light there. But also, for somebody like myself or you, like usually I don't know about you, I'm a pretty stubborn person, right? So I think that there were red flags and patterns going on over and over again. And I use a term called exhausting all options, where I try to change like little things or maybe change things too drastically. And then I would inevitably fall back into my patterns. What I mean by that is I'm losing my train of thought a tiny bit, but at the expense of keeping going.
The point when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
Then you have to make that change.
Yeah. And that's what it is. Like you sometimes I feel like not just me, a lot of people, what we do is we live a certain type of lifestyle, whether we like it or not. But a lot of times we just keep doing behaviors and things constantly, and we know that it's wrong, or we know that it's right and we can improve it, but we don't change it because we're just so stuck in the day-to-day minutia, or we just don't know how to change, or we don't know how to reach out to somebody and be vulnerable and say, I need change and I need help and I don't know how to. And sometimes when we do, it's the wrong person. Like, we're jumping around a lot, but like,
that's okay.
I'm going to root back to my mother, for example. Like, if you want to learn how to be loving and caring and hardworking and give the shirt off of your back and be patient, like, you go to my mother, right? But if you want to learn, economics or how to manage your own finances or how to make business decisions, that's not the person you go to.
Sure.
So the reason why I mention that is because we all need sounding boards. No person is an island, but we also need to know who to go to for these sounding boards. And the issue is that things like that never get taught to us. Yeah. So the only way we learn that is through our own experiences. Who we are today is literally the sum of the perception of our past experiences. Perception being the key word, right? But we need to experience these things in order to get burned by this person and burned by this person and burned out of this person, and be willing to continue to do that till we find that accurate sounding board.
Yeah.
Like, I'm talking to you about your technology and things. Some of it is very simplistic and some of it's extremely, it's very savvy, right? So I now know you two are the guys I go to for my podcast or my webinars, right? Because you can be a great sounding board. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny you said something also, and it reminded me of this thing where people are exactly where they want to be, whether they're willing to admit it to themselves or not, based on the choices you made in the past.
Yes.
So now, if you don't like where you are, maybe I have to do things a little different.
Yeah.
That's that inventory.
Yeah, and inventory is tough to take because it's an honest look at yourself, and and I want to talk a little bit about inventory, but I do want to answer the question that you were asking.
No, please go in again.
So
please.
It wasn't one crashing moment. There was many crashing moments where I tried to make drastic changes, but it wasn't until I was like 27 years old till you're so isolated and you're so alone and you're just at this spiritual rock bottom where maybe you put your life together 2, 3, 4 times and then it just completely topples on your head. to the point where you're willing to get vulnerable and you're willing to say, hey, I don't know the answers. My way's not working. And it's hard to admit that, especially when you have a tendency to be so resourceful, so chameleon-like, so chameleon is a soft word, really manipulative, winning people over. You seem to be getting your way all the time. And 9 out of 10 times it works, but that 1 out of 10, like your life is crashing.
Nosedive, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like experiencing that over and over to a point where you're at a spiritual rock bottom, where in that group of people, you feel alone. You feel like you have no one to go to. You know, you're not necessarily like, I'm going to commit suicide, but you're having thoughts like that. Like you feel just so alone. You're like, what's the point of all this? You know? And that was around when I was 27, to the point where I was willing to be vulnerable and to take those inventories of what we're talking about. Like, take a real deep look inside and be like, well, who am I? What's important? And like, what do I think is important? What is really important? And start to figure out like what to do next. Yeah. You mentioned something about inventory.
No, the inventory is the key there. And it's so important because you're right. And for a lot of people, it kind of comes at that age, in that late 20s, once you start going through life and you realize, because again, you do, especially if you're good at kind of maneuvering in life and you're a smart, intelligent person, you have the charisma, you can get out there, you will have a lot of early success and you feel like you can't kind of miss. And then all of a sudden you start to self-implode, and it takes that kind of experience and those failures to say, you know what, I need to take a step back and look at myself, because everything I'm doing is guiding me down a path I don't want to go down.
Yeah. It's that, and it's the complete opposite of that too, because honestly, mine was the complete opposite of that, because we do hear about that a lot, especially on podcasts. Yeah. People, 21 years old, making $1 million, or 23 years old.
Yeah.
Me, it was the complete opposite. I was completely unemployable, and it's, but I felt inside like there's greatness. There's greatness.
Yeah.
But again, there's this life of duality. Why do I feel this way, but I'm not living up to it? And then you have other people saying, you have so much potential. How come you're not fulfilling your potential? And it's like, and all of a sudden you feel even more lower, right? And it's like, and that's exactly, it doesn't matter whether it's a lot of success or none at all. It's just not aligning with yourself. And that's why I guess the theme of today's podcast and interview is the answers are within.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not blaming society or social media or anything, but like our societal views is we're constantly looking for outside
100%.
validation or verification, when the reality is we need to look within. And that takes vulnerability. It takes pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Like, pattern recognition is huge. Like, it's ultimately how we decide everything that we do, every decision that we make.
Sure.
What we were saying today is the cumulative of all my past decisions and the perception on those decisions.
Oh, yeah.
But like, we need to even think, like, how do we even make decisions? Because circumstances happen, whether we contribute to them or not.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like, I didn't contribute to my father falling down and things like that, but it happened.
Yeah.
And ultimately, in the moment, you have to make a decision. And usually the decision isn't, in my opinion, it's not mental right away. It's a feeling, right? And then so it hits us with a feeling, because if we think about it, our first brain is our gut. It's not our frontal lobe.
Sure. Yeah.
That's one of the last portions of our body to, it's and our gut has a direct nerve up to like our lower brain patterns. So this is ultimately, something happens and we get a feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we get a feeling, consciously or unconsciously, I believe that we think, well, how does this affect me? Like, first before that, it's, what does this mean? Yeah. I have this feeling, but what does it mean? Mm-hmm. Do I flight? Do I freeze? What does this mean to me? And then we say, what do I do from here? And then we're doing this, honestly, a lot of times and not examining these things. And we're making decision after decision after decision. And then we fall in these grooves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The grooves of the patterns.
Yep.
And just to prove, at the expense of being boring, like, we all have patterns. Like, you put pants on today. I know that they can't see that you did because we confirmed it was waist up. I asked him. I said, dude, what's the shot here? It's waist up. Okay, so can I take my pants off? But like, getting back to the patterns, right? Like, you put pants on today. You don't need to think about it. But if I asked you, what pant leg did you put on first?
Oh, wow. I probably did my right because I'm righty.
Yeah. So you don't even know.
Yeah.
But you have a pattern of putting your
Yep.
pants on the same way every single time. Same with the way you brush your teeth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Same with if there was a fire in this room and I said, hey, let's go. There's a fire.
Yeah.
Would you jump out the window or would you go out that door?
Yeah.
You'd go out that door. But why? Because you know through pattern recognition, that's the right door to go out.
Yeah.
And you run up to that handle. You wouldn't push it. You would pull down and pull because you can tell by pattern recognition unconsciously, this is what I do.
You do. Yeah.
The brain, the frontal lobes, does these things because we have so much data coming in on us that we develop these patterns, good, bad, or indifferent. So in order for us to make changes personally or professionally, we first have to get good at identifying patterns.
I want to say something about the feelings. It brings up the ego, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is the ego is not your amigo, I heard. So, basically, and we could talk about easing God out and all these other acronyms that they have for that word. But, when you feel something, like right now, we seem to like each other, but if you were to curse me out right now, I may feel really offended and upset. But then I could think, oh, maybe there's something I did. Like, what was my part in it?
Yeah.
That's what you always have to look at, and not be so my ego bruised, or he doesn't know who I am. It's like, wait, maybe he said that for a reason. Maybe I did something. Maybe, and I'll search my brain, once again, the inventory, and see what I did, and then I'll have an answer. I'll make a decision.
I see you.
I'm here.
Not you. I see you.
The windows didn't
No, that was important. And again, being what you said at the beginning, being vulnerable, being open. It takes a lot as a human being to try to connect to somebody else instead of just the level of surface, right? To actually have a conversation like this, to get to know somebody, to get to know people around you as a loved one or a coworker, no matter what that is.
Yeah.
Even yourself, you have to be vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable to accept love and give love and to be open to anyone. Otherwise, like you said, we said at the beginning, you're just wearing a mask and it's a shell and you're never going to find any form of happiness that way. And you're going through life lying to yourself.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah. I love the conversation about the ego because the ego, all it is,
Yes.
you can have up ego or down ego in reverse, right? Because there are many times in my life where I was like, oh, I'm the greatest. You walk into the room and you just feel like number one. And then there's ego in reverse too, where it's like, oh, I'm just the worst, and no one can relate to me either way. I'm either above you or below you.
Sure.
And I feel like we all have that, but we don't understand because we think of ego as just cocky,
Well, Wayne Dyer addresses that.
Yeah.
He said, I don't think I'm better than anyone. I'm just better than I used to.
Yeah.
So it's all about working on yourself.
It is.
And
But
get that ego out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what the ego is too is it like really what it is just as the Buddhists say and the Tibetans say, it's just a sense of identity. That's all it is. It's just me again versus the world rather than we type thing. And ego's tough. It's just like maybe changing a food addiction because it's like it's something you're experiencing constantly. You need food constantly, right? Like, so what I'm saying about that is like we need to be unique, but at the same time be accepted, right? So it's like that constant balance.
Sure.
Right. In terms of Wayne Dyer, I used to like write a lot when I was alone, and I make up a lot of quotes, and I try to make my quotes like principles. And what I mean by that, it would be applied to everything and still hold true, right?
Okay.
And so I have this quote that I made up when I felt very alone and I was a teenager, and I said that I admire people at high level. Or no, excuse me. I admire people at eye level. I don't look up to my heroes. That way I'm never being looked down upon, if not overlooked.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Who knows? Sometimes your brain thinks like, am I even making sense?
Podcast.
Yeah.
How did that sound?
You're like, does this even make sense? Especially when you're locked in a room by yourself.
For a young man to come up with that quote, that says something about you. That's pretty good. It's important to have those and again, it shows that you were always searching for something. Even that, you said you didn't realize why something was wrong or what you were doing, or is there something more? Is there greatness coming in your life? Are you meant for better positions than you're in right now? You knew you were searching for something indirectly as a child, because teenagers don't make up quotes like that unless you're searching for a greater purpose in life. So you always had that vision of achieving something more, of finding inner peace. It just took you to that time to find it.
Yeah, and it's constant struggle.
Oh, yeah.
Because honestly, I still battle like on a daily basis.
Sure.
Searching for more. I want more. Like, I'm actually in the middle of writing a book, and I was thinking about calling it More, because I tell people all the time, like, I have this disease of more. Like, I just want more. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And sometimes it allows me to prosper and make my world so big that other people could live in it.
Sure.
and they can prosper. But then sometimes it just like leads me to this place of isolation where I don't feel like I'm good enough because I'm not living up to whatever it is standard.
Your expectations of yourself are so great. You're never reaching it.
Exactly. You know,
But you are. Look back and what you have done, and that's where the recognition is that I did do this, and I am worth this.
yeah. And that's why going back to that inventory is so important, especially for me too, because a lot of times I get lost in what I want, and it pulls me out of, it pulls me out of the present moment, and I'm looking to the future. And when I'm in the future, like I'm full of fear, and because I'm either going to not get what I want, or I'm going to lose what I have, constantly searching that way. Or, sometimes I start looking at the past too much, right? But I'll look at only the bad section of it, right? And then all of a sudden I'm resentful at other people, places, things, or myself, right? And then whenever I'm doing that, I'm not in the present moment. And when I'm not in the present moment, I'm not being an effective, fulfilling person. Like I'm not here engaged with you. We all, I like to think we all struggle on that. I think it's pretty proven because you go to a restaurant, you see everybody on their cell phones rather than talking.
It's interesting. I was going to say, it's kind of sad that the human default is always to go to the negative. Do you ever notice that when you think about the past or think about something that happened? For some reason, our default always goes into the negative.
Yeah.
It's such a bad brain space that we're all in that we have to train ourselves to get away from.
Yeah.
Because we all do it. And you're right. Everyone is guilty of that. I don't care who you are or how trained you are. Your first instinct is going to be, what went wrong here? Who did this wrong to me?
Yeah.
And you go in that. You have to train yourself to get away from that.
Yeah.
But we're all like that. And you're absolutely right. Everybody is like that.
It's a survival instinct.
It totally is. I mean, the thing is, we don't have to be negative about it. Why choose the negative? Why not say, okay, and once again, survival, I'm preparing for what may happen. But all that worry, I think Mark Twain said, of all the thousands of things I worried about through my life, one of them almost came true.
Yeah.
So all this worry stretches your body, actually creates disease. So you want to stay away from that. Just say, okay, this may happen. How do I logically think through whatever steps I need to take? Plan A, B, C to deal with what's coming.
Yeah. I think that the answer too is just kind of recognizing these things. Again, going back to the inventory, noticing patterns. Because once you have recognition, then what you can do is you can decide whether it's something you want to change. For example, patterns. Like if we have good patterns, then we identify this is a good pattern. How does this make me feel? What does it mean? What do I do next? Right? I'm going to endorse this pattern. I'm going to double down on it. If it's a bad pattern, once we sit and reflect on it, then it's like, this is something that I need to change. But a lot of people think that they need to erase patterns, but really what we need to do is replace them. Because as soon as you drop one thing out of your life, you got to fill it with something else.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And, but also recognizing that these are literally survival instincts. The reason why we go to the negative is because back then when we first came about, we needed them.
You had to. Yeah, absolutely right.
We're innately scared of the dark. I don't care if you say you're not. Everyone's heightened senses. You're a little more hyper vigilant when
you are. Oh yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Going back to change, you're more hyper vigilant when you're going through change. You're a little more irritable when you're going through change, right? And we just need to identify those things in order to move past it. Because we could start with that first negative thought, or I'm better than, or less than, or whatever it is, but we can think past it because we have that ability, but we need to be able to sit and explore it.
I used to say one quick thing. I used to say that, I used to have to be vigilant day by day. It went to hour by hour. It went to minute by minute. It went to every second because that negative thought may pop in my mind. I have to instantly replace that with a positive thought.
Yeah. One thought away from a bad decision.
No, you're 100%. And what's beautiful now, as you brought up the, back in our caveman days around the fire where our instincts had to be everything, right? Otherwise you would die. What's beautiful now is there are groups and places you can learn, like our friend Flory, great places. There's programs out there where you can get self-development. We live in a time now where if we want to make the change, we can make the change. And that's fantastic because I'm sure when everybody was, trying to hunter-gatherer, live their lifestyle, you didn't have that option.
Yeah.
You kind of were scared, you're living, and you're kind of, dying off in your mid-30s, and that's your life. And you survive. Now we actually get to live a life, change our mindsets, be around like-minded people that want to change our mindset. And that's what's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful time to be alive now because we can be better than we were.
It is. Yeah. It's all through exploration. That's why I love history.
Me too.
I love to explore, the evolution of humankind, the evolution of money, the evolution of economies, all these things, because we're talking about inventory on a personal level.
Yes.
but like exploring on a macro level as well, not just a micro level, then we can really start to identify all these things and process them. But going back to what you were saying, like in regards to, the personal development, a lot of what I do in my companies when I'm talking to people, I would say at least 50 to 60% of it is helping people process emotions.
That's right. Yeah.
And think things through logically. Before we even start getting into more sophisticated business strategies and systems, it's like, let's lay a foundation here, because we all come so wounded, right, from our past experiences that like we carry that blockage.
Yeah.
From our childhood, from relationship to relationship, from all these things. And I don't have all the answers. Like I still do it on a daily basis. If you don't believe me, ask her. But
well, it's live your dreams, not live your dreams with a silver spoon in your mouth.
Yeah.
Most people haven't had the straight path to success. There's been a lot of ups and downs and valleys and hills. And therefore, that's what makes you who you are, builds your character.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. And it's very important for everybody listening who are trying to follow their dreams or opening up businesses, young entrepreneurs, young filmmakers. You do need that moral inventory before you start on this journey. Because if you do not know who you are, like you said, if you don't have that foundation, if that's not 50, 60% of who, your business model, knowing who you are and where you're going to be as a person, you're going to fail in the long run. There's no way you can actually maintain that if you don't know who you are as an individual. Because no matter what, as an entrepreneur, you're going to run into a lot of struggles. If you don't know you, you're going to crash. So everybody that's watching now, please listen. Alan's giving great advice here. Take that moral inventory to yourself. Find out you before you start down a path that's going to make the rest of your life change. Because if you don't know you, you're going down the wrong path and you're going to eventually just implode.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
I actually have processes and systems of how to take these moral inventories. But, you said something great. I'm kind of lack of words for. Okay. It was kind of, oh yes, now I recall it, right? So yeah, essentially what you're saying is you've got to stand for something or you fall for it.
100%. 100%.
And for example, one thing that I found through, again, pattern recognition and also beating my head against the wall, not personally, but professionally, is that, for example, my real estate company, we've been able to scale. And we've been able to scale because we've taken an alternative approach. And in the real estate industry and pretty much any 1099 sales contracting industry, which is essentially what real estate is and many others are, you have a revolving door. People come in and out and a lot of ego, right? Especially they come in, flash in the pan. They're making more money than their parents, more money than they ever have. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you helped and contributed to that. Easy come, easy go, right? So after seeing this and seeing this transition a lot and doing exit interviews with people, trying to figure out what's going on. It's still happening to this day.
Yeah.
I realized that, a lot of it is based off of, a business and people. We're not our assets and liabilities. We're not how much is in our bank account, how much stuff do we own. A business isn't made up of how much inventory do I have, what's in my bank account, what are my expenses. It's really made up of its people, and its people make up its culture. So we need to identify these characteristics that we stand for as individuals, and then also in our communities too, because our life is like a dinner table and we invite people to eat to it. And everybody brings their own different thing, but we want to make sure that it's an enjoyable dinner. Yeah. Some people bring great conversation, others bring laughter, others bring dessert, others bring money so we can buy out, right? And with one of my companies, for example, and people don't need to utilize this, but I was talking with Gene on the way down here about this, and I create acronyms and processes of characteristics that I want people to have in order to work for one of my organizations. And it doesn't mean they have to embody just these things, but I'm saying as an entrepreneur, if you want to come into my ecosystem and you want to be coached by me, you have to fulfill this acronym that I call a person who cares, right? And C stands for coachable.
Sure. Hey.
You have to be coachable. And you have to come to me and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. And I have to do the same as your mentor. Yeah. I have to realize I don't have all the answers too. And I need to hear your feedback. Maybe I'm implementing the wrong softwares. And it's not at one time it was the best. And now it's not. Yeah. But you're down in the trenches and you need to tell me these things. So it's anything that I hold, I values that I have them fulfilling, I expect to fulfill too as an entrepreneur. Sure. A stands for ambitious, because you can be extremely coachable and absorb all the knowledge, and so can I, but knowledge isn't power. application of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's where the power is. I tell people all the time, like, I could teach you how to wire this room, but until you actually put the wires together, there will be no light.
Yep.
Right? We need to apply it, and we need to be ambitious enough to implement the things that we are learning. And that's a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
A lot of people, we have the intent to do great things, or to be peaceful, or be in a great relationship, or be a great parent. We have all these intentions, but majority of people's actions don't line up with their intentions.
Absolutely right.
And that's the big disconnect right there. And that's the capability gap that I usually coach, right? How do we get these two things to align, which is autonomous for every person?
Sure. Yep.
So first I got to listen. It's autonomous for you. I'll get them to align, and then you see people take off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going into the next one, R stands for resourcefulness, right? And this is something that was taught to me very early on in life, but also being stubborn when I became an entrepreneur. Like, it wasn't showing up in my entrepreneur journey. And I'd go to my mentor at the time and I would say, hey, how do I do this? And she would say to me, well, did you Google it? And I get so mad at her. I would. I'd be like, why did I Google it? You're my mentor. Fuck.
Give me the answer.
Yeah, give me the answer so I can get out and create more revenue. I'm a rainmaker here, right? Because at the time I was a salesperson. And I was so frustrated in that part of the journey. But like, in hindsight, she told me how to be resourceful.
Yeah.
Because she was forcing me to try to find the answer, to come with more information, which allowed me to have more sophisticated conversation. So the conversation wasn't starting down here.
Yes.
It was starting up here. Hey, I looked into this.
Yes.
I understand this, this, and this, but I kind of got lost at this point. And now all of a sudden I'm way beyond that. But that takes resourcefulness.
Sure.
And not to go too deep. What's an early onset of resourcefulness? Being observant. And you as an individual, you could practice that any day of the week, any time of the day. You can go to a restaurant and just test yourself. You know, what color tie was the waiter wearing? Is he serving with his left or his right? You know, when you're talking to your intimate lover, right? Like, do they lean in or lean out? How do they laugh, right? Try to learn, like, pick up on that.
Yeah.
Because once we're observant, then we can be resourceful, because you need to be observant in order to be resourceful. E stands for executive, right? So I realized that whether or not I'm hiring a salesperson, an administrative assistant, or anything, everybody I need to know is at least open to an executive type mindset. And what I mean mainly by that, and at least in my entrepreneurship journey, is there give and take? There has to be give and take, because that's the ego part that we're talking about. If there's no give and take and we don't establish that in the beginning, whether it's a personal relationship, parenting, or professional, if we're not establishing that I, as a parent, Alan, need to also listen to my son and compromise with him at some times, then I'm going to be a horrible parent.
That's true. Yeah.
So an executive understands that. And an executive also understands to teach an executive we're going to correct that because I don't want to talk to people about
that. Yep.
So an executive also understands to teach their disciples, for lack of a better term, or their mentees, hey, this is an executive type journey. And I'm going to teach you to be better than a salesperson or an administrative assistant. I'm going to teach you how to be an executive, because ultimately we're all executives.
Sure. Yeah.
We're the CEO of our own life, you know? And if we mold people professionally, they're going to take those tendencies out personally, because we spend most of our time in the professional world.
That's true.
So the E is, of cares is executive. And the last one is strategic, right? And strategic means it kind of bookmarks the beginning and the end with the coachability. Strategic is, a lot of times people buy franchises. Why? Because there are systems in place. So it's strategic to do that. But the young entrepreneur, we start our own journey mainly out of ego, right? Because we want to be the big shot and be our own. And going back to it, I mean, most people in their 50s and 60s don't start entrepreneurship journeys because they know how much effort it took, where it's just easier to buy someone else's business and correct things. Yeah. But strategic is just like that. It's implementing work that may be more upfront, but it will save you time in the long run.
Yes. Yep.
And we also can pull this into our personal life too, by taking those personal inventories and understanding ourselves, by taking that time to ourselves to do shadow work, as Gino often talks about, like doing this personal things so I can get to know myself, so I can see the values that are the characteristics that I value in other people, so I can decide whether or not they're worthy of eating at my dinner table.
Yeah, so very true. Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking.
Well, like you said before too, about going to the diner and just observing people, the big thing is it's not only what people say, it's what they don't say. There's a body language that exists.
Yeah.
Whether someone's leaning into you, away from you, all that stuff counts. And, you know, basically it's listening, you know, as an actor, we have to listen. We have to stay present. We have to be in the moment. But it's a great skill for everyone to have.
Yeah.
You know, the craft of acting is a really good skill for people. You learn to listen to people, and then I'm reacting to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
Chris, that's a great way to put it, because a lot of people don't realize that aren't in the film business, that acting is not being loud and, boisterous. It's actually listening and reacting to the other person. Because if you're just out there yelling lines, like in any business or personal relationship, you're not connecting with the person.
Mm-hmm.
All it is connection. So in life, we have to be actors as we're observing, we're connecting, and that's what it's all about. And that was a great analogy for our film listeners out there.
Thank you. We're always selling ourselves.
Yeah.
You are your CEO of yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
Or the product I'm selling or the service I'm selling.
Yeah, or the people I represent. And we are all actors because we're all pretending that we know what we're doing.
Everybody tries to, right? Yeah, and everybody knows a little bit of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But no one knows everything at the end of the day, and it's so important. And I'm so glad you teach your mentees that, that you're open to hearing their suggestions, because you're learning as much from them as they're learning from you. It's a different perspective, right? Everybody's a give and take in life. And when you can actually listen and observe and actually care what somebody else is saying, connections actually are a lot better than just surface level stuff. Because, you have somebody who's loud and boisterous. Usually they don't really have any friends or people around them. They have a lot of superficial kind of relationships. There's no concrete life.
Once again, a lonely life.
That's a terrible way to live.
Yeah.
Man. It's an awful way.
And a lot
to
of
live.
people that are loud and boisterous, like they think they need to be those ways based on the ego, because if I individualize myself, I'll get more attention. But I love the actor analogy, because, what I realized, because there was a time where I've taken acting classes.
Okay, good.
Right? And I like to take random classes.
Sure, yeah.
Flory and I have taken comedy courses together.
Awesome.
I've taken public speaking. I've taken speed reading, all like really diverse things, accounting.
Sure.
I'm not talking about college accounting. I'm talking about like late night at the local library.
You like the anecdote learning.
Yeah. I'm constantly doing something. But to be the actor, what I've kind of realized too, to even just be a background actor, it's acting as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Where do I go? What do I do? Like, no one's listening to me. We're pretending to have a conversation while the real conversation's over there. And that's the, just the acting of it.
Well, we're all part of the whole.
Exactly.
Every person has a place and a purpose for being there.
Every person is important in any circumstance. And that's the same thing in a company. The janitor is just as important as somebody working. You need everybody there. That's why I always tell people, treat people with respect. And if you go into situations, listening to somebody, open to what they have to say, appreciate them, and respect them, you could pretty much go anywhere in life and at least be okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not going to form enemies, at least. You'll be able to survive, go to a new town, go to a new company, and if you're respectful to what people do, at least they'll be receptive to forming relationships with you.
Yeah. And you're 100% right. It goes back to that quote, not looking down on people or look down upon, right? And I love that too, because I have tons, in the development company, I have people that literally clean for me the buildings that I own, right? And I have no problem requesting from them things to do, because I know if they're unwilling to do it, I'm not above doing it myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's key. If someone that came to school, let's say you hired a manager, they came right out of school, they never worked their way up to a manager. They can't identify your other people that managing can't identify with them, because they're coming just with school, not the applied knowledge of working with people. It's so different. You go to school, you learn something in the book, then you work real estate. I also have a real estate background, right?
Yeah.
So what you learn on that test, what are you using?
No.
None of it.
Yeah, majority is thrown out.
Majority's not doing it. It's all negotiating skills and people's.
That's what you learn on that test. Do these things, you get sued.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, exactly. It goes back to the experience, the sum of our own experiences. And if we don't take inventory, then we're not analyzing our experiences, so we're not really learning from them. So we're falling back into these unconscious patterns that we don't even know about, right? It's honestly all kind of simple, but not easy, right? If we want to make it that way.
Now, you teach so many people, you have mentees, you have people around you. How do you find yourself implementing all this kind of knowledge with your son? Because that has to be a different relationship, right? You have a son that's different than an employee. It's different than a mentee. Yeah. That has to be interesting. Now, you're seeing a young version of yourself growing into the world, becoming a young boy, becoming a young
literally
kid.
me.
Right? No, so that must always be unique, right? Because I don't have any kids. I'm not sure. I've godchildren, people like that, but no direct child. But that must be quite an experience to be able to give this knowledge and pass it down. But then sometimes, like you said, you have to say, like, man, that's me.
Yeah.
That has to be unique.
Yeah, it's crazy because when the people that are most like us are the ones that frustrate us the most.
Sure.
And honestly, I would say that area of my life is probably where I'm the most lost, but open to learning, and I'm making a lot of progress in. Because again, based on the sum of my experiences, like, maybe I had a lot less supervision than anybody growing up. So like giving another person that I care about so much supervision and being he's such a dependent of mine. It's like, it's really, really new territory for me, and it can get very frustrating very quickly. Because like, for example, when I was growing up and I was going through a lot of my difficulties, I often would be like extremely rude or mean to my mom, and I never wanted to be. That was not my intention, but that was my action.
Sure.
They weren't lining up, and then I would leave that experience or that situation and really beat myself up over it. And I started just sitting in the dark and thinking about it, like, why am I the meanest to the person that I probably love the most on this planet?
Kind of odd, right? Yeah.
And I kind of like looked around and I realized like, oh, a lot of my friends and other people do the same thing. Well, why could this be, right? So just start taking inventory and examining it. I'm a thinker. I'm a very much thinker, not by choice, but by survival instinct.
Sure.
I'm more of a feeler, forced to think because it pushes the feelings down. But so I started looking at that relationship with my mother, and I started realizing, well, I think I'm really rude to her because I know she loves me unconditionally and she'll always forgive me, right? And then, and again, these patterns show up in our lives. So like with my son, sometimes I'm super hard on him, his expectations, or, I'll forget that he's only 7, and I'll talk to him. In some ways it's good because I'll talk to him like an adult. So he is extremely articulate and his thought processes are well advanced on his age. But sometimes maybe I talk too aggressively with him with my tone, and he's really sensitive, and it hurts that, right? So I think that how am I implementing with my son? It's just trying to be aware of it and be open to other people's observations of it, but also that reflection time after situations either go great or not great, to just like sit in silence and really like think about it, or even scribe about it and just say, okay, well, that went great, but how can it be better? And the more,
Yeah.
right? And again, because I love him so much, I'm extra hard on myself about that. I mean, I'm hard on myself about everything, but that especially. But yeah, it's the reflection. I would say you're helping. You're like, I feel like I'm getting downloads now because of you.
It's all you. What's beautiful though is the fact that you're saying it. What people listening have to understand, it all comes back to the moral inventory. It doesn't matter if it's going to be your son, business, other relationships. It comes down to understanding who you are.
Yeah.
How do you apply things to people? And everybody does have to take a step back, because I'm sure for a parent it's frustrating. For a business owner, it's frustrating. For a relationship, it's frustrating. But we all have to take that step back and think, because like you said, so many of us lash out at the people we love the most, unfortunately, because we always have the security that they will always be there. And you know what the sad thing is? Maybe they never will walk out the door because they choose to.
Yeah.
But one day those people may pass on. They may not be around.
Yeah.
So even though they won't ever leave your life willingly, we should stop lashing out at these people, because one day they may be leaving our lives unexpectedly, which is very sad. We have to treasure those moments with the people we love and try to always take a moral inventory and say, you know what, instead of lashing out instantly at this person, I'm going to take a calm step back and say, you know what, let's process before we speak.
Yeah. And we don't realize these things till the older we get.
Yeah.
Realize I only have X amount of summers left in my life, right? X amount of springs.
Yeah.
Like my mom is getting older, and I've been intentionally trying to reach out to her more. When I was younger, I mean, I would go long periods of time not communicating with her, my father, having my father die when I was younger. You experience that, but then you still get lost, right? Got lost in work.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, oh my God, it's been 3 months since I talked to my mom. Like, let me reach out to her. Like, yeah, sure, my bank account's looking great, but like, what's going on in my personal relationship with my own mother? Yeah. So, but also going back to what you were saying, an exercise that I do, because I always try to give people, if anyone's going to watch this and find value in it, like what are things that you can implement immediately that can change your life, right? So one thing that I try to teach a lot of people that are my mentees, again, going on personal and professional, I teach them what I call an EOV, and it's an explanation of value. And what I mean by that, it's an explanation of my values and what I value and the value that I bring, right? So if I can articulate that when I'm talking to someone, whether it's personally or even professionally, when they ask me, hey, what do you do? I say, well, hey, before I tell you what I do, can I tell you what I value?
Yeah.
And go right into that, because then they intimately get to know you.
Yeah.
And you kind of just talk a little bit about that. And I usually talk about, hey, these are my value systems, right? And this is what I believe in, right? And based on my beliefs, this is why I do this.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And based on my beliefs and why I do this and what I do, am I somebody that you want to be in business with? And you can do that call to action to the end, right? Like, for example, I'll give you, like, I have these EOVs for everything that I do.
Sure.
When I was a real estate agent, people would ask me all the time, what do you do? And many people just say, oh, I'm a realtor or I'm in real estate, right? And the conversation ends there. Matter of fact, many times people run away from you because they can't start us on. So I created this thing, and it's a variant off of things I've learned from other people, because I've heard of an EOS, which is an explanation of services. But then I just changed it because I believe value is probably more
Sure. Yeah.
services. So people would ask me, hey, what do you do? And I'd say, hey, well, before I tell you what I do, can I tell you what I believe in? And I would say, I believe that everybody deserves their own personal oasis. And they find that oasis in the privacy of their own home. It's a sanctuary that they can go to and be safe and be their self. I didn't always feel that way. So that's why it's really important for me to help people find that. And it's the American dream, and it's not the white picket fence. Sometimes it's at home, sometimes security in their own bank account. And that's why I'm a real estate agent. It helps people find their own home, but I also mentor other people on entrepreneurs, how to build their own bank account so they can find that security. And so they can become and express their true self and become their true self. And based on these values, maybe you or you know someone that want to be in business with me, and just kind of close out like that, right? And it's a little more elongated, but it's way more.
Oh, you kidding me? Oh, yeah, much better. You can get the right people around you.
Yeah, and sometimes people are like, well, this weirdo. But guess what? then go eat at someone else's
Go eat at somebody
table.
else's table. Exactly. No, you don't want them in your life anyway.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
You're attracting the exact right people.
Going back to the quotes that are principles, but like everything has a principle behind it. And there are always exceptions to the rules or to the principles, but you know, everything ultimately takes a lot. Like we, for example, on the news or on TV or whatever, we see these one-hit wonders or these people that hit right away, or these technology gurus that just hit their first thing, Mark Zuckerberg, you know. But what we don't understand is they either were putting in a lot of time winning in the dark. There's a book out there called Winning in the Dark.
Oh, that's a good book.
Or they're just the exception to the rule. But we see that and we glorify that, where we're not glorifying the more traditional route.
Sure.
Which is the Scooby-Doo running analogy that I like to say, like where, you know, when something happens, they just start running and they're running in place and then they take off.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier about your home office and when you started the business. I thought right away of Amazon. You see him in that little office. That's where he started. Look how big he is now. People like Tyler Perry in the film industry. Where'd he come from? It seemed like he came out of nowhere. When he was with the churches, he actually had a lot of following before he became who he is.
Yeah, and a lot of that was probably, again, because of that's what he valued. Those people at his dinner table. He was connecting with them. He was doing it because that was aligning with his moral compass, and it just ended up working out in the way it did.
Well, imagine if you took that kind of lottery ticket approach, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you hired the greatest team around you that you can trust, you are going to fail so quickly because you have zero experience. Like, you got to the game too quickly.
Yeah.
You cannot play at that level for too long. Now, again, you better be very smart, have great advisors around you that you can trust, that you can put into those positions, because you don't know how to do it. Yeah. It's always a nice time when you actually spend the time building your business up, because then when you put other people in those positions, you already know what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. Yeah. So you can take a little bit of a step back and not to be so nervous about, like, okay, I know what this person's supposed to be doing. I know what the COO should be doing over there. I know what his operations are going to be because I did them. Yeah. As opposed to saying, like, well, I got, I was 21, I got lucky, and I have no idea how to run a company.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be in a lot of trouble. The situations in my life, we had an opportunity to do a massive film, when I was in like 2011, that time period, And I was like, this is going to be great. You know, it's going to be my first feature. It's going to be huge. All these people with that.
About to blow up.
Right? And I'm like, thank God that fell apart because I would not
People are
have
calling you. Throw some respect on my name. Like,
would have been a mess.
who is this? Mom? What?
So bad, right? And I think now, you know, we do the same kind of projects now and it works out. So easy. All the years of like going through those trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
If it would have been successful off the bat at that level, no way it would have been maintained.
No.
You would have failed miserably at that point.
It's knowing what they need to do, right? They're the intention, and then knowing that they're going to do it. So you have the right team, as you were saying, knowing that they value the same things, articulating those values.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, it's one thing to hire extremely capable people, but if those things don't align, then all of a sudden maybe they're not doing exactly what you need.
No, you're right. And it's so smart that you do that all the time, that you want to sit down with somebody and talk about their values first, and you show them your values. That conversation, even though I love that you laughed about it. It's true. So, oh, this guy's a weirdo. He's telling me all this stuff about himself. But that's so important because if you don't align in your values with somebody, how are you going to have a long-term working relationship? Because you will come to a crossroad down the road. And look, it doesn't make one person a good guy or a bad guy. No. It's just different values, right? And you have to respect somebody else's values as well. So let them go on their journey where they want to go, and then you go do your thing over there. And I hope you the best of luck. But it doesn't align with the values that you're trying to do. That's so important that you do that. Yeah, it's great.
And I love what you were talking about, even in acting. They don't realize that it's a business. I'm a late. I used to be for a little time a Tony Robbins platinum member.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So I was very involved with Tony Robbins, and he has this analogy that he uses where there is the artist and then there's the entrepreneur. And a lot of times we get into something, a passion project, we do them because we love them, and we get really good at it. And that's what the artist does. And it's not necessarily stroking the canvas. You know, lawyers, attorneys, they're artists in the courtroom. People are artists in influencing people. But the entrepreneur, they understand the scalability of it and the hard decisions and placing people in the right positions. And a lot of times, us as actors or us as even small entrepreneurs, we are the artists, but then we fall out of love what we do because we're forced to become this entrepreneur. So like being able to know our values, align with other people, a lot of people would get much further building that team, making sure that their values align and hiring to replace themselves.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Or grow into that person.
I would say, you know, learning how to access both sides of your brain is the logic one, there's a creative side.
Yeah.
I think a lot of actors may not be good at business because they are so much on their creative side of their brain. They should learn the logical side where they can implement, you know, inventory and things like that, which make you successful. What's working? What's not working? Let me do less of this. Let me do more of this. This is working. You know, you have to always do that reflection on yourself. You just can't be out there just creating. You know, you have to sort of reel it in.
That's how you get taken advantage of, a guy like Don King. Or,
Yep.
But also, I think is important too is that a lot of times we don't start because we think we need to know so much. But I also often tell people, you need to know enough to be dangerous, right? So if I was an actor and I'm trying out there and I'm super creative and I'm Leo DiCaprio and oh my God, I can at top of just change my tone, my mood, everything all at once. But I need to know enough about the business side to be dangerous, to ask the right questions so I know I'm not being misdirected. But I don't necessarily need to know everything about it and do it myself. That's why I took those accounting classes at the library. Not because I got to do my own bookkeeping and accounting. Sure, at one point I did. But I needed, as my career grew, to be sophisticated enough to ask the right questions to inspect what I expect, and I inspect by asking questions. And the quality of our life is directly correlated with the quality of questions we ask ourselves and other people. And if you want a high quality life, ask high quality questions. You want to learn how to ask high quality questions, ask high quantity of questions.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Experience asking the wrong questions, not getting the right answers, and then you'll get more skilled at it.
That is so well said, because so many people are afraid to ask the question, and don't be afraid to get the answer you might not want, because you're right. Ask a lot of it. When you notice somebody stares at you like this, you asked the wrong question, right? Like, you know, what are you talking about? But you know then to scale up your questions, and you know how to ask them better, because you are 100% right. You need to be willing to know enough to be dangerous in any field you're in. I don't care if you're actually going to the car mechanic.
Yeah.
You should know enough so they're not going to take advantage of you. And that's the most simple kind of like commonplace that people always say. You go to a mechanic, you get ripped off, right?
Yeah.
But if you go in there asking the right questions, they're going to go, well, I can't pull one over this guy.
Yeah.
I had a lot of actors that I helped sign with agencies across the United States, a lot of getting them the roles and things like that. And I said, when you talk to these agents, do not talk about passion. Don't talk about the craft of acting. Ask them these key business questions.
Yeah.
And they're going to take you serious and say, this person's dangerous. I want to work with them. Because they actually know something about the business.
Yeah.
That's the key to anything in life. Know enough about something where people won't take advantage of you. So well said.
I had that years ago. I think it was a grammar school, and the only stupid question is the one that you don't answer. You know, and once again, learning a little bit about accounting, because when your business is growing, you have to delegate these things out to people. So at least I know, is my accountant taking advantage of me? Because I know a little bit about accounting. Is my manager taking advantage of me? I know a little bit about managing, so you can pick and choose the right team.
Yeah, 100%. And you see a lot of these people highly successful. They get taken advantage of. You know, they're not reporting their taxes.
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes, people like that.
How do people with that type of like intelligence and money around them not know? You know what I mean? There's like
They don't know enough to be dangerous.
Well, there's that, and there's also greed, because there's also Leon Hemsley and the other people that have taken tax evasion in some ways, or were spending money in the wrong places, and they suffer penalties as well.
And that's like going back to, again, that moral inventory, that moral compass, knowing who you are, right?
Yep.
Be like, if we're constantly checking in with that, then we can, because it's very easy to get off the right path. I mean,
oh yeah,
I do it
100%.
all the time. All the time. I'm like, I try to take a nightly inventory, and I'm like, hey, what went great today? Where did I make mistakes? Do I know anybody? Apologies, right? Like, and I don't do it perfect. I don't do it every night, but like it allows me to touch base, because honestly, we can get, or I'll speak for myself, I can get blinded very quickly. I can get lost and down the wrong path before I know it. I'm like, wow, it's been 3 months. That escalated quickly. You know, like, oh man, I'm doing stuff that like, I'm not that person. That's not the person I want to be. Why am I doing these things, right? And we all, I mean, again, I'll speak for myself, but at least it seems that we all do that a lot. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my childhood and everything, because it forced me to be resourceful, to analyze, like that isolation, that weighing of the ability to feel different, forced me to just kind of be like, well, why do I feel this way everywhere I go? Let me explore this. Let me ask myself some questions. Right. And then find the answers, right? Which also goes to say the answers are in the question.
100%.
You know, and the answers in the conversation that we have with other people and ourselves.
I like what you said earlier too. I bring up the word mentor. You know, your mother showed you how to work hard. Right? I love that. To me too. I always worked hard. Since 8 years old, I was working.
Yeah.
Okay. So who are other mentors in your life besides someone like that in the family that throughout your journey?
Yeah. Honestly, that's a great question. And because of the situation with my father and like my older brothers, specifically Joel, like he's one of my closest older brothers. He's the next oldest brother up from me. And he was probably, when I was like an early teen and also in elementary school, he was still living at the house with us. And he was a great older brother, but he was also like 21. So like, how much responsibility you want to dump on it?
Sure, yeah.
He did things like coach my soccer team or drive me to the movies periodically, right? But he wasn't there like, say, a father figure should be, like every day shaping this person, right? So, you know, that being said, like, because I felt so different, I started resisting authority. And when you resist authority, almost if people try to mentor you or give you a passive, even compliment, you reject it, or suggestion, you reject it. So then you start trusting in yourself. And later on in life, that I really struggled with that, because I felt lost and I felt resentful to other people who maybe had those built-in mentors, and I didn't know where to go to get it. And I went from mentor to mentor, meaning not mentor to mentor, but like I get attached to, say, one of my friends' fathers or something like that, right? And I would ask him for advice, and he would give me great advice, and he'd be there for me as much as he could be.
Sure.
Until he couldn't be. And then all of a sudden, I'm resentful at this person, or, you know, or even my situation, because he can't be there, or because no one was there. And now I'm totally unique again. But where did I find these mentors? You know, it was through a lot of pain. searching, getting the wrong one that would mislead you, take advantage of you. It's an older kid in the neighborhood. It's another person's parent.
Sure.
It's a teacher. Oh, the teacher's gone next year because they got transferred, they moved, or maybe you just went into a different school or whatever. And there's a lot of pain in that. But like, I don't know, for some reason I was able to do more or to move on to more and more. But then when I got older and got more into my entrepreneurship journey, like I realized, like, if I want a mentor, I swiped the credit card and I paid for it, because guess what? Now there's an obligation. You can't.
You get
And you better deliver, because I'm gonna fire you. I think. And because I have that distance between me and people, like emotionally, like it was a safe place for me too, because it was more transactional than
Sure.
right. And so that's honestly like where I started finding a lot of my first like really, really effective mentors. And I still pay for mentorship.
Sure. Yes, important.
A lot, a lot, because and I think of it as like, it's a la carte. Take what you want, leave the rest type thing, right? Because again, knowing those sounding boards, knowing who to get advice from, and implementing and realizing that wasn't the best advice, or taking a grain of salt or whatever. But yeah, I would say, right now, still to this day, because, I don't own the biggest company, but I'm at the top of the companies. And one of my mentors, or my business coaches that I bet, when my life's burning to the ground personally, or it feels like it is professionally, he always says, "Ooh, I don't envy you." I'm like, "Right." He's like, "It's lonely. You have no one to go to. And he's my only person to go to. But then I find people to go for specific things. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know the answer, because it's like, should we trust that one person, like, to give them everything, that significant other, but also they don't give great advice on everything. So maybe they're just there to listen. And then I have fragmented friends where I give you a little bit about this. I vent to you about my personal relationship. I vent to you like about being a parent. I vent to you about my professional relationship, my money woes, or being a mentor or being a mentee. It's like, I don't know.
It is a great way to actually, it's a great honest assessment of it. It's a very hard answer to have, because you're right. If you do put all your chips into one pile and one person, what if they're incorrect?
Yeah.
So it is good to have a lot of different perspectives. But what's great is that you are open to listening to a lot of different people. And I love that you said a la carte, because not everybody has an answer to all your questions.
No.
You might have a mentor in business that knows how to shape a business, knows how to make a business be very successful, but this person never had any kids and has no family, and they cannot give you advice in how to raise a family. So if they're giving you that advice, that's clearly not the right way, because they never lived it, and they're just kind of arbitrarily just speaking at that point.
Also, their business advice could be shit too, because
never know.
they don't know how to balance the two.
They might be all go, 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 go. You're absolutely right.
They do have kids, but they're neglecting that portion, because I've been there.
Yep.
I've definitely been there.
Sure.
And those are probably the most painful situations.
I have an employee who comes to me a lot for advice.
Yeah.
And he'll always say, something about his kids. And I'll say, look, man, I don't have a family.
Yeah.
All I know is you should balance your time with your family.
Yeah.
That's all the advice I can give you there.
That's
right.
Honestly the best thing you can do, because it's a broad stroke.
Yeah.
And it's basically saying, go to someone that may know that.
That's what I said. I said, if anybody's giving you advice that's, in our position, that's telling you work harder, well, they don't know your obligation to your kids. And nobody should be telling you anything about that unless they're in your shoes.
Yeah.
So you're right. A broad stroke sometimes may be the right approach.
And once again, going back to it, maybe they do have that experience, but who are they to say to you work harder, because maybe their values don't align?
It comes out. You're absolutely right.
I have one of my mentees and my best friends, Tom Cody, right? We've been working together for 8 years. I've known him for 10 years.
Sure.
We have a very intimate relationship in regards to friendship and also professional relationship. And we have an understanding that we both work really hard, but our value gauge is also a little different too, because he values his personal life a little more than I do.
Sure.
And I admire him for it. Like, he will go on vacations, he will go to concerts, and he's rubbing off on me a little bit, because I spent 8 years, a decade of just like, these YouTube gurus will tell you, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, multiple years. Most of them are saying that. Like, I have experienced.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's not a fun life. While watching him still scale his business, but also not at the expense of his personal life.
Sure.
And so, like, but getting back to the point, what's the point? gauging that person too. Like, hey, what are their values? Like, like looking at their life. Like, does their marital status, is their parenting status, all the things that you prioritize, does their life look exactly what the way I want it? Because I can go to someone that makes, $15 million a year, but maybe their balance is off.
Sure, absolutely right.
Being grown up, again, analyzing our past, looking at my father and the relationship lack of relationship he had with me. That's a huge value in me.
Sure.
I'm an entrepreneur. I run 3 successful companies. It takes a lot of my time, but I will not run them to the point where for a while, I wouldn't be, I will not negate my obligation to my son, and I make time to be his baseball coach.
That's great.
Tonight, I'm driving back to Connecticut. I'm picking up my son. We're going to go to the batting cages, or maybe I'm going to grab Gene's kid, and we're going to go to the basketball court or something.
That's great, yeah.
But I had to learn through my experiences that I value this. Because there was a time where my son was 3.5, 4 years old. I came home, and he's just like, Daddy, I never see you. And I'm like, I'm working so hard to give this kid a better life, but the purpose of business is to fund a perfect life, and this is not the perfect life. I don't want to be a stranger to my kid. Mm-hmm. I had that from my father, but just in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like, again, one of those, we were going back to those pivotal moments. Yeah. It was a small statement by a 4-year-old that it started a correction in my life, because honestly, I didn't even change my behaviors right then and there, but I remember it now.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Since then, I've changed my behaviors because other things compounded off of it. But like, to me, that was a pivotal moment.
Well, he was wise behind his years, because I think they did a study years ago. I know they did a study years ago. I forgot the second thing. I think it was happiness. But the first thing was they interviewed the most successful men and women in their careers and what they regretted at the end of their careers. They didn't spend enough time with their family was one big one.
Yeah.
And the other one may have been maybe taking things too seriously and I was happy. But the family one hit home because they worked, they had the success, and then they don't spend time with their family. So what kind of success is that? Were you there for other people? What is your purpose? Just to make money, or is it to be there for people and to enjoy it together?
Yeah. And we get like, it's this balancing act, and we won't know the answers till we ask the questions, because I think also not just as men, but the masculine, the providers, because a woman can be a masculine provider as well.
Sure.
Especially single women that have to provide for their family and be the mom. And like right now, like, I'm in a relationship, but also like I live in a house alone. So I am the mom and the dad, like when my son is with me.
Sure.
Right. And there's a lot of pressure in that. Like there's a lot of, and especially, again, I don't want to turn it into a man-woman thing. It's a masculine-feminine thing. But like, how do I be the provider, but also still find that balance where I can come home and be with that person? Because we're constantly questioning that fear of like, okay, I'm providing financially, like I'm doing a good job, but I'm not there enough. And then we go there enough. Oh, but I'm not working hard enough where I make sure after I pass, this person has legacy or has security. Yeah. It's like, it's that constant juggle and battle.
And again, I think, like you said, there is really no answer to that. It's a constant, I think, adapting to change.
Yeah.
And as your child grows, I'm sure his needs are going to change and your needs are going to change.
Yeah.
So there's going to be always, I think it's an always balanced thing. I think it's always going to be an adaptability. And that's the key. The more we're open in life to being adaptable and actually taking the inventory, looking at the current situation, the better. Because what your son needs now is going to be different than what he needs in 10 years from now.
And it's all going to change. That's just one very serious component of it. But we're constantly having that battle, in person.
I mean, even your friends, take a buddy, for instance. I mean, and if you're in your, early 40s, you're not going out with your friends playing with Legos like you were as a kid,
or hopefully even at the bar.
Exactly, right, yeah. So you have to, everything changes of where your priorities go. So all relationships evolve.
Yeah.
And I think people are afraid to ever take a step forward. Mm-hmm. So many people you see that meet up together or they talk to old friends and they kind of stare and they go, why am I even here?
Yeah.
But it's because they're not evolving together. They're just like trying to relive a part of their lives that was great. But that's in the past.
It was
Move the past forward, right? That was that chapter. It doesn't make the person a bad person.
That was that scene. Go back to the act.
Yep. Don't keep going back to it because it doesn't, and it will never be as good. It's like when you see, a remake of a movie. It's never as good as the first one.
Yeah.
So why keep trying to rehash what was there? Appreciate those moments, move your life forward, and appreciate the new life that you have in front of you. Always evolve. That's important.
This back to, I think, like communication's key. Obviously we talked about listening earlier. In any relationship, whether it's you and your girlfriend or you and your business, if you're not listening and communicating properly, you may not be growing going in the same direction. If you are communicating, okay, we're going this way or we're going this way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you may be separated. So it's really important to communicate daily, I believe.
Yeah. And there are definitely skills and strategies for effective communication.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I like to think of myself, I am an extremely good communicator in some areas of my life. When it comes to business, I'm a very good communicator. Expectations, values,
Sure.
Persuasion, whatever it is, right? And then in other areas of my life, I struggle with it. Like communicating about emotion. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to feel this way. Oh, I want to spend time with you. I don't. Or whatever. You're like, oh, that's all crazy stuff, right? So, but it's just like, again, going back to the questions and what's going on here? Like where am I struggling? Where am I succeeding? I'm like, I see a pattern theme that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It comes back down to the question.
I was just going to say that there's 100%. And it's funny because, again, I'll bring up again when Flory came on here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things she stressed to everybody, it's actually on one of the shorts on our site. You can see it. She brings up questions, the importance of asking not only yourself, but everybody around you the right questions, because that's going to gauge your whole relationship. Why are we here? What are we doing? What do we want? Or again, you're going to meet somebody. Well, what do I want out of this person?
Yeah.
Not in a way of like gain, but it's this person, my friend. What are we doing together? Why are we actually spending this time together?
Yeah.
Do we make each other happy? Are we trying to go on a business journey? Are we just trying to go get a dinner? What's the point of, are we rehashing old times? But when you ask yourself a question before you get in a scenario, you have a playing field. You know where you are as a flying blind kind of.
Yeah. And I think maybe a lot of times we're afraid to ask questions, whether it's personal or professional, because we're afraid to see the real answer, because we're also afraid to say, well, this doesn't work, or this doesn't work for us, right? And a lot of times, like, at least professionally, I teach a lot of my mentees, like, ask the right questions, because if you're not a good fit, it's better to know that early on in the relationship and just kind of move forward and let them go find somebody that's a better fit, or establish like, hey, we're a great fit. Let's move forward with that. And that comes through a lot of, mindset, a lot of entrepreneurs and also people, self-help gurus. They talk about mindset.
Yeah.
Right?
You mentioned values too before, right? Your values. Time, the value of time. As we get older, we have less of it.
Yeah. So it's,
Right? So it becomes more valuable.
yeah, exactly. And it's weird because that's an emotional thing, but it's also a logistical thing too, because if you think about it, like, time is more valuable to us as we get older because we respect it more, not just because we have less of it, but because it's like proportionally less of our life. Like, for example, like, time flies when we are turning 40 as opposed to when we're turning 10, because it's 10%. 1 year is 10% of our life, or 10, but it's 1/40th of our life when we're 40. So relatively, it goes quicker.
Sure.
So not even just, hey, it's going to end someday soon, but it's just like, it's going by so quick.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like my son, like life is long for him. For me, I'm like, oh my God.
Where the past year
Where's it going? Yeah, you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And you're right. If we don't actually take a step back and look at these things,
Yeah.
and passage it by way too quickly. And you're right. So many people at the end of their life, I didn't spend enough time with my family or my loved one, or even being good to myself. It doesn't mean being greedy.
Yeah.
Asking yourself, were you happy in this destination? Were you happy in the journey? Because if you're there at the end of the day and say, look, I have my $8 million house, I'm doing well, and you wake up and there's nobody in it, you're alone, you're not happy, and you didn't want to be there in the first place. Now, if that was your goal, great, you got there. But if your goal was to have 6 kids running around and grandkids in the room, and now you're alone, you missed the point.
Yeah.
So everybody should have a really good understanding of where do I want to be at the end of the day.
Take an
Evaluation. And that's the most important thing. And I love that you stress that to everybody around you. And we try to do the same to anybody we try to give any advice to. Know yourself before you do anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're flying blind.
Really enjoyed talking with you.
Are you kidding me?
Kind of like, we're at a mastermind. Oh, we want to ask, I want to, little group. Like you said, like, this is not a podcast. It's what do you,
A talk show.
it's a talk.
Like a talk show. Yeah, more of a talk show, right? So we try to.
I
do
make
that.
me fan.
Yeah.
He's Johnny Cause.
Yeah. No, but I enjoy it. And I don't know if this is going to make it onto it, but like, I've recently set up a studio, and I don't want to call it a podcast, but like, I'm doing this thing where, like, I'm bringing people in and I'm kind of interviewing them, but it's not based on one specific subject. It's about things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Genuinely want to learn more, and I want to ask like high quality questions, and I'm doing it for myself rather than other people.
It's more of like a forum almost.
Yeah.
You're creating like a live forum basically.
Yeah.
Like that's what it should be called. Oh, please, thank you. That's what we're here to do, right? We're here to collaborate. Well, that's what I do. I work in this space. I know that world. It's a forum. You're bringing people in to be in a forum to speak with you.
Yeah.
I love that kind of idea because I think, again, like you said, there's always good educational podcast things that are out there, and those are great. But I like when you have, again, if you are interested in learning something, now you're having this forum around you. Or like we have a talk show. We're interested in learning. I want to know Alan.
Yeah.
Not about one specific nuance of your life. I want to know you. So every show, and again, almost like life, appreciate what other people are doing at the same time. I appreciate the educational podcast. I appreciate the forum style show. I appreciate anything. I said, I have one quote out there. I said to people in the movie business, I don't care if you spend $1 on a movie or $100 million. If you got it done, there's somebody intelligent behind that was able to get people that believed in them to work on something, to take something from an idea in your head, to get the paper, to get the screen, to sell it.
Yeah.
You got to appreciate that. Even though it might not be your cup of tea.
Yep.
Appreciate the work and the respect the craft that was into something somebody else does.
I agree.
I think that's the key in anything in life. Again, like you said, moral inventory, and it comes down to respect at the end of the day. You do that, life is fantastic. But I have to say, everybody, Alan Stewart Jr., what an incredible individual. We said it at the beginning, and we'll bookend this the same way. I said wow at the beginning. Wow. I mean it even more now. You are an incredible individual. This was one of my favorite shows. Really, I'm telling you.
Oh, really?
Talking to you was fantastic. You are an incredible person. You're a kind soul. You care about people and a success. It was so good having you on the show. Chris, anything great you have to say about this guy?
No,
fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said and more. You're kind and it shows. It's really nice to have a heartfelt conversation with someone who also has a business mind.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, you can't get better. You're a lucky lady. By the way, his girl is here on the stage. But yeah, I mean, it really is. You are more than even I anticipated. Your website doesn't even do justice for the type of person that you are.
I try to speak the language of the heart.
Yeah.
No, you definitely do, Alan. And what we'll do is everybody will have all of Alan's links in the description below. That'll be, again, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and blog, maybe 10 or 12 other different streaming sites, everywhere you get your podcast. Again, this is the Live Your Dreams podcast. My name is Joe Gawalis. We're very excited, again, to have Alan Stewart Jr. on the show today, everybody. Again, like, subscribe, share, because we are the dreamers, and the dreams make the world go around. So without us, the world is a very uninteresting place. Please support this podcast, support everybody out there, and again, please follow your dreams, live well, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you, everybody. Take care.